Okay, we need to talk. This is an urgent security briefing about a major flaw in Fortinet firewalls that has been actively exploited for years. The goal here isn't just awareness, it's to push for immediate action. Because right now, there is a wide open door on thousands of networks that attackers have been walking through since 2020, and we need to get it shut. So let's start with this number, 9.8. On a scale of 1 to 10, that's the critical severity score for the vulnerability we're about to tear down, CVE 2020-12812. You know, a score this high means it's about as bad as it gets. It's easy to exploit from anywhere in the world, it requires zero user interaction, and it has the maximum possible impact on your security. And here's the really scary part. It's just how ridiculously simple the exploit is. We are not talking about some complex chained vulnerability here. We're talking about a single, deliberate typo. An attacker who has a valid username and password can completely sidestep your multi-factor authentication just by changing the case of one letter. That's it. Game over. Now, you might be asking, why are we sounding the alarm on this years after it was first disclosed? Well, because of this number. Right now, today, there are over 10,000 Fortinet firewalls connected to the internet that are still vulnerable to this exact flaw. This isn't some dusty old problem. It's a clear and present danger to thousands of networks. So that really begs the question, right? How can a vulnerability that's years old still be such an active threat? Let's dig into why this problem just won't go away. So what is this thing exactly? CVE 2020-1212 is what we call an improper authentication vulnerability. It's in the FortiOS SSL VPN. And in plain English, it means an attacker who already has a username and password can completely skip the second factor of authentication. They don't even get prompted for a token or a code. They just walk right in. And just to be crystal clear, this is not a theoretical what-if scenario. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's CISA, has put this flaw on its known exploited vulnerabilities list. You know, the KV catalog is basically CISA's official list of vulnerabilities that are being used in active real-world attacks. Getting on that list is a huge, flashing red light. So let's get a little technical. How in the world can something as basic as changing the case of a letter completely shatter a core security control like MFA? It's actually a pretty simple failure. The whole problem boils down to this fundamental mismatch. On one side, you have FortiOS, the operating system on the firewall. It's case-sensitive. To FortiOS, lowercase jsmith and uppercase jsmith are two totally different users. But on the other side, you have the LDAP server, which so many organizations use for authentication. And it's usually case-insensitive. To LDAP, jsmith and jsmith are the exact same person. And that disagreement, that's the crack in the armor an attacker slips through. So here's how the attack plays out step by step. First, the attacker tries to log in, but they change the case, jsmith instead of jsmith. Second, the FortiGate, being case-sensitive, looks for an MFA policy for jsmith and finds nothing, because the policy is correctly assigned to lowercase jsmith. Now here's the critical failure. Instead of just denying access, the device falls back to a different, less secure authentication policy, one that probably doesn't require MFA. And finally, the LDAP server on the back end happily confirms the password for jsmith because to it, case doesn't matter. And just like that, the attacker is in. 2FA is completely bypassed. The fallout from this simple flaw has been huge. I mean, let's look at the documented history here. This isn't just some proof of concept from a lab. This has been a go-to tool for some of the most sophisticated threat actors on the planet. You can see a very clear pattern here. In 2021, it was being used by state-sponsored actors for getting their initial foothold into networks. By 2022, it was a key part of global ransomware campaigns. And now, years later, it is still a trusted tool for major threat groups. The threat hasn't disappeared, it's just become part of the everyday toolkit. Way back in 2021, the FBI and CISA actually put out a joint advisory about this. They were very explicit, warning that advanced persistent threat actors were already scanning the internet, mapping out every device that was vulnerable to this CVE. They weren't just poking around, they were actively preparing for future attacks. And then in 2022, those warnings became reality. Another advisory came out detailing how Iranian government-sponsored actors were using this exact Fortinet bug as part of their attack chain. They'd get in, move around the network, steal data, and then deploy ransomware to encrypt everything for extortion. Okay, enough about the problem. What do we do about it? Let's get to the most important part, the immediate, actionable fixes. The whole point of this is to give you everything you need to shut this door for good, right now. First things first, you have to patch. The fix for this is baked into FortOS versions 6.4.1, 6.2.4, and 6.0.10, and of course, anything newer. If your firmware is one of these versions or a later release, you are safe from this. It's the single most effective thing you can do. Go check your version right now, and if you're behind, schedule that upgrade immediately. Now, I get it. Sometimes you can't upgrade right away. If that's you, there is a mitigation. For those older versions of FortiOS, you can log into the command line and run this one simple command. This command tells the firewall to stop caring about case sensitivity when it's matching usernames, which completely neutralizes the root cause of this vulnerability.
And just a quick but really important heads up, if you're on a newer version of the firmware but you want to double check this setting, just be aware that the command has changed a little bit. As you can see, the new command is slightly different. Making sure you use the right syntax for your version is absolutely key.
Look, patching and mitigating are crucial, but they're reactive. Let's talk about getting ahead of the game. How can we truly harden our network perimeter to defend against not just this threat, but whatever comes next? All right, to get into some more advanced defense, let's talk about a powerful technique, using a loopback interface. So instead of having your VPN service exposed directly on a physical port, you tie it to a virtual internal interface. This is a total game changer because it lets you apply firewall rules to VPN traffic before it even gets a chance to authenticate. So this slide really lays out a great blueprint. First, isolate your VPN traffic using those loopbacks and virtual IPs we just talked about. Second, set up some automation to automatically block IP addresses that are just hammering away, trying to brute force common usernames. And finally, be proactive. Use things like ASN blocking to cut off entire networks from sketchy hosting providers, and layer that with threat intelligence feeds to block known bad IPs before they even get to your front door. All of this brings us to a much bigger, more strategic question. After years and years of critical bugs and emergency patching, is relying on SSL VPN for our remote access really a good long-term strategy? Honestly, the consensus in the security community is probably not. A lot of pros are actively moving away from application layer VPNs like SSL VPN. They are often complex, they're proprietary, and they've proven time and time again to be a source of these critical, remotely exploitable flaws. The attack surface is just too big. So what's the alternative? What does the future look like? Well, there are two main paths forward. The first is IPsec VPN. It operates at a lower level of the network stack and is built on open standards, which generally makes it more secure. But the real future is Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA. This is a totally different approach that throws out the old castle and moat model. Instead, it grants users access only to specific apps, one session at a time, which dramatically shrinks your attack surface. So I'm going to leave you with this one last thought. Your firewall is supposed to be your fortress wall, right? It's your most important line of defense. This vulnerability shows how one simple misconfiguration can leave the front gate completely unlocked. So the question you need to go ask yourself right now is, have you checked yours?